Now that Grace no longer has to hide her number to play carnival games, she flaunts her perceived status symbol with an air of pomposity.
Isn't it beautiful? It's okay. Admire me.
You gotta love her confidence. I can see why Jessie ends up falling under her spell. She just carries herself in such a cool way. Shame that she's a major clod that runs a fucking child cult that's intent on keeping kids from ever returning home. So let's discuss cults and how they recruit people, featuring Jessie. First off, people undergoing significant stress are more susceptible to being recruited into a cult, and the Infinity train is not only full of passengers who have had troubling life experiences, but the train itself often contains cars full of stressful stimuli. Not to mention the entire concept of being abducted by a reality-bending train is pretty damn stressful in and of itself. Jesse isn't the perfect target for recruitment, as he has a strong attachment to his family that he wishes to get back to, but he's not too far off. Jesse tends to not think too hard about what's happening around him, he tends to bend under the assertiveness of others, and he has a naive idealism that other people are generally good and have his interests in mind. Jesse, of course, also retains his people-pleasing tendency and the desire to be seen favorably by others, although as we've seen over multiple episodes, he's gradually been working on that issue.
Oh, good? It's pretty good. I don't know why I said that. Tastes like old pennies.
Grace takes full advantage of Jesse's personality, including the fact that he is attempting to make more decisions on his own behalf, to subtly manipulate him. This episode lays out very early on how conniving and insidious Grace actually is. She tells Jesse to wheel the candy, which is early prepping for the concept of wheeling things.
Then wheel it. Kick it to the wheels.
Something the Apex supposedly do a lot, not only to inanimate objects, but also to nulls, as they call them. More importantly, Grace makes Jesse think wheeling the candy was his own decision when he's technically carrying out her orders.
You do what you want.
Already, a mild power dynamic has been established that Jesse is in the dark about. Then, after making Jesse feel like he's behaving on his own terms, Grace makes sure to provide positive reinforcement to make Jesse feel like he is valued.
Look at you. I like what I see.
Grace is already laying the groundwork for Jesse to subconsciously follow her lead, and they only just met. She is crafty and a pro at exerting her influence. Wheeling a bag of crappy candy seems like it should be benign, but it's actually the first stepping stone toward the end goal of making Jesse feel like joining the Apex would be liberating. A big part of early cult recruitment is making the target feel wanted, loved, and cared for. Grace utilizes flattery a bunch in this episode. She consistently throws compliments Jesse's way to make him feel validated.
Because I care about people. I care about you, Jesse.
Jesse's brain is like a deer in the headlights when showered with so much affection. Grace and Simon just talked about how 1-1 is a saboteur, a fake conductor who stole the rightful position from Amelia, whom they idolize and designed their cult insignia after. In a case of projection, they claim 1-1 is trying to brainwash passengers. Hell, Grace and Simon flat out revealed that they don't want anybody in their cult to ever leave their rightful train, and yet this information all ends up being background noise to Jesse because he's so caught up in the emotions Grace and Simon are trying to instill in him. Simon's involvement in Grace's indoctrination protocol is calculated and planned in advance. They definitely have a routine that they've refined over time. Simon is used to play up the tightly knit community angle, but his primary role is to drive a wedge between Jesse and Lake, both figuratively and literally. There's no way having the underlings discreetly take Alan Dracula to the stables off-screen was mere coincidence. Doing such a thing was for the purpose of making Lake appear needlessly insolent, to the point where Jesse steps in to defend the Apex from Lake.
Stabled? You took our friend and locked him up? You didn't think to check with us? Or with him?
Hey, MT! They're probably just trying to help. Mistakes happen, we're all human.
Grace and Simon have already made Jesse choose their side without him even realizing it. With the figurative wedge established, Alan Dracula's absence gives further cause for Jesse and Lake to split up, as Jesse is beyond hyped to go on a scouting mission, while Lake wants to make sure Alan Dracula is alright. Thus, Jesse is physically isolated from the one person who might be able to talk sense into him so that his continued indoctrination can proceed unimpeded. As if Grace and Simon's recruitment wasn't working spectacularly enough already, they also have 3D maneuver gear!
What? Cool.
Why would you point them at your eyes? This joke fucking broke me because of how much of a fucking idiot Jesse is. Whew. Okay, so continuing with the recruitment discussion, Grace is a very perceptive person. Throughout her time with Jesse, she's trying to pick up on his fears and vulnerabilities to better facilitate her attempts at thought reform. When she sees Jesse get startled, she tries to use that as a jumping off point.
I get it. The train can be confusing and lonely.
When that approach doesn't appear fruitful, Grace quickly changes the topic to try and convince Jesse in a rather convoluted manner that he's better off without Lake.
Sounds like she's got a lot of problems that you got pulled into.
It's rather scary to think about what may have happened if Grace and Simon met Jesse before he was able to befriend Lake. Jesse slipping up from peer pressure and suggestion is nothing new at this point in the series, but this time he has acquired enough experience to feel that something is wrong. The Apex's attempt at indoctrination ultimately fails because Jesse has already developed a deep and meaningful bond with Lake that he is completely unwilling to abandon. Thinking of nulls as meaningless and disposable is a core part of Apex ideology, but it runs counter to Jesse's worldview and current objective, so he ends up sheepishly laughing along without actually buying into Grace's narrative.
Yeah.
The best Grace is able to do is get Jesse to concur with a specific statement based on technicality.
I guess technically she's not like us.
But there's no value judgment there from Jesse. He doesn't see Lake as less of a person simply because she's different. While Grace is a very smooth talker, and I can definitely see how her words could have a big impact on those who have barely interacted with train denizens, her attempts to deny Lake's humanity ring completely hollow to Jesse. Even before Jesse sees Lake in danger, he's deep in pensive thought about his current situation. I think even if the Apex weren't hostile to Lake and Alan Dracula, Jesse would have still ended up rejecting them. Hostile might be an understatement. At first, Simon just tells Lake to take the deer and get the hell out of their train car.
Get out of here before Jesse gets back. You can't help him like we can.
Lake obviously doesn't take kindly to being forcibly separated from her friend, which results in Simon's decision to wheel her. I loved the glare Grace gave Simon when Jesse returns and Lake still hasn't been taken care of yet. Out of ideas, Simon tries to physically stop Jesse, but dependency and fear are things cults take time to cultivate. Insubordination isn't a moral dilemma for Jesse like it would be for indoctrinated members of the Apex, who may I add also tend to be younger and smaller than Jesse. I should really stress just how messed up it is that Grace and Simon target children. There's no other adults in their cult. They specifically seek out and recruit those less developed than them, both physically and mentally. Grace and Simon prey on the weakest of passengers, those they think they can mold under their tutelage in their formative years. Presumably so when the recruits do grow up, they'll remain obedient. Grace and Simon are really bad people, which is gonna make Season 3 quite interesting. So, Jesse is absolutely 110% done after hearing that the Apex want to kill Lake. Cults generally hide immoral and or illegal activities from newer members until they've been sufficiently acclimated toward the cult environment, and Jesse was by no means anywhere close to that far gone. Hearing that the Apex would want to throw any train denizen under the train's wheels, much less Lake, would immediately serve as a harsh realization for Jesse about the need to take a stand.
Don't tell me what to do. I'm not going to be a part of anything like this, on or off the train. I'm done with you, and anyone else like you.
Everybody give him some applause! Jesse's backbone has finally materialized. My one nitpick with this episode would be that Alan Dracula used none of his superpowers despite being in distress. Alan Dracula is clearly not fond of being saddled or roped, but the deer doesn't shrink or grow or split apart or turn into electricity or explode or do any of the myriad of things he's capable of to get free. It seemed really weird when Alan Dracula regularly uses his powers to avoid giving Lake and Jesse a ride when he's not feeling into it. By the way, I was really hoping we would get a prolonged scene of Lake and Jesse mercilessly beating up small children, akin to something like out of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, because I find that concept darkly hilarious. But I'll settle for that metallic right straight that Lake throws into the face of a child. That kid's face ain't gonna be pretty, I tell you what. I found the mall car to be a superb episode. While Jesse's temporary regression and eventual self-actualization was a plot route the audience could see coming from the start of the episode, the manner in which legitimate methodology of cult recruitment was interwoven into the episode made the experience very engaging. This episode was crafted with a lot of finesse. Also, Jesse just straight up leaving the train by himself with 3 episodes left in the season? That I did not see coming, and my reaction can be summarized as, whoa. The scene where Jesse's body is phasing away was also really, really sad.
Jesse! No. Oh.
That desperation in Lake's voice cuts so deep. What a fantastic cliffhanger ending to a wonderful episode. Something fun to mention before this review draws to a close. In Book 1 of Infinity Train, Episode 7, The Chrome Car, was Lake's episode. It established her personality, her outlook, and her desires, and Book 2 picked up from that point to continue telling her story. In Book 2 of Infinity Train, Episode 7 was Grace and Simon's episode. While Grace made her first live appearance at the end of the Lucky Cat car, Simon did not show up until this episode, and the mall car is very much the Apex-focused episode of the season. And now, Grace and Simon will be the main characters in Book 3, Cult of the Conductor. So the obvious follow-up question is, will this trend continue? Will Book 3 feature characters in its 7th episode that will go on to become the protagonists of Book 4? Assuming Book 4 is greenlit, of course, which I dearly hope it will be. While continuing this trend would remove some of the surprise factor of what each successive season would be about, I do think it would be pretty neat if the creative team decides to stick with it. Anyway, Book 3 is out in just a few days, and I'm very excited to see what chaos Grace and Simon end up causing.